Hello, this is I Go Travel with Don Barnett, and we're still down here in this hotel in Panama City. And this travelogue is about the American section of building the Panama Canal. And they had to overcome a lot of stuff. They had to rebuild the railway. They had to overcome the malaria and yellow fever problem. So it's quite a story. Come on, this is the American end of the canal story. The French were out of the picture. The Americans decided to build the canal, but the question was where? Should they take over and inherit the French disaster with all of its problems? A big engineering U.S. study by American engineers said that it would be better to do a fresh start next door in Nicaragua, where there were fewer mountains, less disease, and a huge natural lake for the important water supply. It became another great American political issue. The vote came down to a vote in the Senate. The close vote difference was about the distance or the thickness of a postage stamp, although the pre-vote prediction favored a vote for Nicaragua. However, the night before the Senate vote, one of the pro-Panama supporters bought a Nicaraguan postage stamp and stuffed it in every senator's mailbox. The stamp showed Nicaragua as a land of beauty and volcanoes. Volcanoes? The message was, do you really want to build a canal where a volcano could destroy it and kill everyone? This thought made the difference. Next day, the vote for Panama won by a mere 6 votes. Let's look at the map and just get a little orientation on the details of the canal. We'll start down here. Let's start by the Continental Divide, the yellow line. And that's the highest point. So the water would run this way toward the Pacific Ocean. Panama City is down in here. And the red arrow shows the Miraflores Locks, a nice big tourist exhibition area there, these locks. And here's the Culadra big canyon area where they had a very difficult time getting the rock removed from. And the canal runs along this way here. The big dark area is Gatun Lake. And the lake was made, now remember the water is running downhill toward the Pacific Ocean. And before the lake was formed, the river was called the Chagres River, and it comes out about here. Now, they built the dam, a big dam, Gatun Dam, right in here. So the water backed up and formed the big lake behind. And there's a big set of locks here on this side of the canal called the Gatun Locks. And the canal comes out in this area here, very close to the big city at the top here. If you can see it, it's called Colón. And it's second in size to Panama City in terms of size of city. The medical breakthrough that occurred at this time was a great boost for the canal. Carlos Finley, a doctor from Cuba, determined that malaria and yellow fever was transmitted by the mosquito. Walter Reed, the U.S. medical leader, initiated, therefore, a real attack on the mosquito. These dirt mounds are made by large biting ants that were everywhere. Water containers had been placed around trees and around the legs of beds, including hospital beds. They stopped the ants from crawling up, but they were also perfect breeding grounds for the deadly malaria and yellow fever carrying mosquitoes. Everyone was horrified. They had been, in effect, enabling the spread of the killer disease and didn't know it. Spraying in the canal zone became non-stop. Wet, muddy streets and roads were other mosquito areas. So therefore, concrete was poured everywhere. And now the French were gone. The mosquitoes were set back. But actual construction remained at a standstill. U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt finally talked with America's premier railway builder, a guy by the name of James J. Hill, who was owner of the Great Northern Railway. James J. Hill, shown here, told Roosevelt, "You will never build a canal with that little toy narrow-gauge railway that you inherited from the French. You need to build a real railway, and then you'll get a canal. No railway, no canal. It's as simple as that." Roosevelt told Hill, "Okay, you go to Panama and build us a new railroad." Hill's reply was a sound no, but he would send his head engineer, a guy by the name of John Stevens, to go and do the job. Stevens went down, and within a year, he had replaced the narrow-gauge French railroad. Stevens did the work in about a year. He replaced the narrow gauge. He elevated the railway bed and made it better and more firm. And he laid heavier rail. And finally, he widened the rails to normal width. Now the big new machinery could be hauled in. And more importantly, the tons of dirt and rock removed to build the canal could now be hauled away. Bigger machinery and the new railway enabled the canal to get built. Stevens quickly replaced de Lessep's inadequate idea of a straight level trench canal with the workable notion of building steps or locks over the mountains. This diagram shows the canal locks in the black open-sided squares. They fill and empty with water to lift and lower ships up and down from sea level to over the mountains. Here you can see cuts on the mountainside building the trench. And this is more work at the bottom of the canal trench. In this chart, the dark, narrow excavation done by the French was later increased to the light checkered width later dug by the Americans. Here you can see the amount of rock and dirt excavated by the Americans in 10 years, compared to what the French excavated over a 20-year period. Again, bigger, more efficient machinery made the difference, and so did the new heavy-duty railway built by James J. Hill and his chief engineer, John Stevens. It's getting sundown down here in the jungle, and we've got to turn the lights on. The canal, when it was built, the big celebration opening was 1914, and Roosevelt came down. It wasn't as big a celebration as they would like to have had because it was the beginning of World War I, and everyone was paying attention to that. However, when Roosevelt came down to celebrate the grand opening of the canal, he put on one of these hats. And Americans are great promoters and sellers of their product. And pretty soon everyone, not just in the States, but around the world, they were calling this the Panama hat. But actually, it's not a hat from Panama. Its origin is in another country, Ecuador. But you know, you can call this hat a Panama hat or an Ecuador hat. I call it a mighty good hat, and I like to wear it. Okay, we've talked a bit about the top of this chart here, the opening of the canal in 1914, and then it was about 50 years or so where Panama started to feel some resentment against the U.S. control of the canal, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. And then the cocaine trade became a big factor, and it led to hostility between the U.S. and Panama. And the Panama leader, Manuel Noriega, was involved in the late 1980s. And eventually, then another number of years, eventually it led to the transfer of the canal to Panama. And of course, the last big thing in the canal history was in around 2016 when the big expansion was made to accommodate the big superliners of the world. But I'll just go back and show you a few pictures and make a few comments about the 1960s, the riots, the cocaine trade, and the gradual movement toward Panama taking over the canal. The Panamanians did not care for such U.S. dominance within their country. And in the 1960s and 70s and the 80s, considerable social and political unrest occurred. Although a reasonable fee was paid by the U.S. to Panama for canal use, other factors became important. For example, one irritant was that the U.S. would not permit the Panamanian flag to fly in the canal zone. Demonstrations were frequent. Panama became a key link in the drug trade between South America and the U.S., and this factor added even more tensions and conflict to the situation. Manuel Noriega became president and dictator of Panama. He worked both the sides of the drug trade, working with both the U.S. and the drug traffickers. It all came to a head when the U.S. Sent troops into Panama to depose Noriega. Noriega fled to the safety of the Vatican embassy because embassies under international law were safe havens. The U.S. respected this factor and was therefore unable to enter the Vatican embassy to get Noriega. Here you can see a car turned over in some of the early demonstrations. But back at the Vatican embassy, loudspeakers were set up and hard rock music was played outside the embassy 24/7. The noise pollution drove everyone crazy. Finally, Noriega and others inside the building walked out and surrendered. They were just unable to withstand the loud noise pollution anymore. Like I said, the canal situation was eventually solved when Panama took over control of the canal. And since then, it has been peaceful times, and an efficiently run canal has just made the world a smaller place. The top 3 dates on this timeline complete the story. The unrest that surfaced in the 1960s came to a conclusion when the canal control was transferred from the U.S. to Panama in 1999. The only other significant canal event occurred in 2016, 2018 at the top there, where the canal underwent a major expansion to accommodate the new mega-sized ocean liners. Well, there you have it, the American story of the canal. And I'm looking into a mirror here as I'm talking to you. But it's the only chance I get to talk to an intelligent person, is when I talk to myself. All right, hit the subscribe button and the thumbs up, and we're going to do even a little bit more down here in Panama, and we're headed for other places as well. Adios.